Howdy, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Run from the Norm podcast, where we spotlight the rebels and the runners who carve their own damn path. My guest is someone who does just that. She's a professional trail and mountain runner, Olympic trials qualifier, a 2:36 marathoner, co-owner of Fleet Feet Treasure Valley, race director, graphic designer, social media manager, and if that wasn't enough, she also is a successful startup founder with a company on a mission to de-escalate high-risk situations and save lives. My guest is the one and only Lacy. We talk about everything from the pressures that come with starting young in elite competition to navigating eating disorders and finally rediscovering a love for the sport. Megan opens up about building community through dynamic partnerships and why her approach to movement and business is more about heart than hype. If you've ever felt like your story is messy, nonlinear, or not exactly what you planned, this one will hit home in the best possible way. You know what time it is. It's time to run from the norm. Okay, Megan, we have been talking about getting together for a little while, and we are currently in the Fleet Feet Meridian store, the store that you co-own with your fiance, Alex, and I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and have a conversation with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Excited to chat today.
Well, let's start from the beginning, and why don't you explain a little bit about where you grew up, maybe what childhood was like for you?
I grew up in New Jersey, a smaller town called Marlton, New Jersey. I say that I'm from Philadelphia around here because I'm about 25-ish minutes away from Philadelphia is where I grew up.
Okay.
It was on the cusp of the city suburbs and then the wilderness. So there's a Pine Barrens area over there, so I grew up right in that area.
So you don't claim to be a Jersey girl?
I do. No, I totally do. Yeah. I'm a Jersey girl. I'm proud.
Yeah? Well, What was it like growing up? Were you active? Were you into athletics? Are you an only child?
I have two younger brothers, so I'm the oldest, and I was pretty active starting at 7 or 8 years old. Before that, I really had no interest in sports, which I know sounds really young, but I went from picking daisies in the field at 5 or 6 to being like ferociously competitive.
Oh, geez. So did you say it was brothers?
Yeah, two younger brothers.
So
yeah.
Was there competition there? Or?
Not really. I mean, I think sometimes there's always inter-family competition, but
Right.
We had different interests, so I didn't really view them as competitors. I more so viewed external boys as my competitors. So
Gotcha.
I did like beating boys. That was something I enjoyed, but my brothers were younger than me, so I wasn't trying to beat them.
You were the older sister. There was no
Yeah.
competition. Well, what flipped the switch for you?
I don't really know, but all of a sudden I just loved competing. I started with swimming, and the first year I did swimming, I made the team, and then they demoted me from the team.
Oh, geez.
Because I was so bad. And then the next year I was the state champion in swimming. So
Oh my gosh.
it was just all of a sudden I just became good at sports, which I'm really grateful for, but it really was like a binary action that happened.
There wasn't like a different focus to where after that first year, you're like, okay, I got to come back and kick some butt here?
There was probably a little bit of that, but I think it was mostly just realizing that if I worked really hard, I could be good at these things. And once I saw some of that progress, then I just kept funneling all of my energy into getting better at the sports I was doing.
Were you solely focused on swimming, or were you running too at that point?
I actually started swimming when I was 4, technically.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so pretty young. And then I started running when I was 8. And then I actually played soccer. So I started soccer when I was 6. So I was doing all 3 by the time I was 7, 8, which is when I really started getting serious about sports, which is crazy because it's more than 20 years now at this point. Yeah.
And then at what point did running take over as kind of your sole focus?
Running was always my primary focus.
Okay.
As soon as I started running, which I actually only joined the track team because I didn't like softball. So I tried softball when I was 7, and that really was not for me. They kept having to bring the tee out, and that would be really embarrassing for me that I couldn't actually hit the ball. And so I decided I did not want to be embarrassed anymore. So I started running, and I was really good at it immediately, which I'm really grateful for, but I think it also caused some anxiety in my career over time. But I basically went from starting running to being the second fastest 8-year-old in the country over the span of 3 months. I didn't even have running shoes yet. It was honestly pretty crazy.
Yeah,
and it all
sounds like
happened
it.
so quickly that I didn't even really fully understand until after the season was over.
And you said the second fastest 8-year-old in the country.
Yeah, in the 800 meter.
That's crazy.
Which was like the 2 mile back then. It was the longest they'd let 8-year-olds run.
And nobody else in your family or anything? This is just something you went off on your own?
Athletics isn't really like a massive focus for my family. My brothers are both in the military now, so they stay physically fit. They do like training and doing athletics, but I'm the only person that really pursues sports at like a deep level.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how much pressure does that put on you as an 8-year-old? Are you having fun doing it, or does it turn into something where you're feeling the pressure? Because I think there were some issues that developed, stress-induced ulcers. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I mean, would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, I think pretty quickly I put a lot of pressure on myself. And I think a lot of that was internal and just the way that I am. But I think also people say things like, oh, you're a future Olympian, or I'm going to watch you one day on TV. And then you start to internalize that. And I think people mean really well when they say things like that. But I think if you're already a perfectionist, then you're like, I have to go to the Olympics now.
Sure.
That is my sole focus in life. Like you mentioned, I actually did get stomach ulcers when I was 9. And I started having a lot of performance issues that I think were mostly mental blocks.
When you say performance issues, are you talking about like consistency or
like I'd just choke at nationals or something. And when I'm talking choking, I'm not saying I'd come in last, but I would be ranked.
Not perform to where you expected.
Yeah, I'd be like ranked 2nd or ranked 3rd, and then I'd come in like 12th or something, or I'd come in 6th. And it wasn't that I wasn't fit enough. It was just that I was having panic attacks essentially as like a 9 and 10-year-old kid. So I really think I lost my love for it pretty quickly, honestly, which was kind of sad.
But you kept going with it.
Well, I've always felt like I needed to run. And I think there's a few reasons I felt that way, but I just always have felt like it's a really important part of me, even when it hasn't really been agreeing with me mentally.
Sure.
So I think there was like a deep love for it beneath all of that. But I also think that a lot of it was rooted in my ego and wanting to be the best.
Do you think it's also maybe being at such a young age, you don't fully understand how to find the balance of these things, and everybody's telling you you're going to be a future Olympian, and you don't have the maturity to process that yet?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I was just really driven as a kid. So this is kind of a ridiculous story, but when I was 3, I was driving up to New York with my mom to visit my dad, and my mom said that we passed Princeton, and I said, I'm going to go to Princeton and major in mechanical engineering. And my mom was like, where is this coming from?
And you were how old?
Like 3.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I was like way too focused on achievement as a kid.
But as we'll get to, it sounds like foreshadowing for where you ended up.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. But I think that I just put so much pressure on myself to be the best at things. And regardless of if it was running or if it was something else, like I also was pretty serious about the violin and singing and,
interesting.
And grades. And so I think that pressure, regardless of if anyone was telling me I was going to be a future Olympian or not, I was going to put that pressure on myself.
So were you finding joy in this stuff, or were there other things you were doing more for fun? I mean, how does an 8-year-old train? What's a training protocol of an 8-year-old?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think swimming was always my fun thing because we'd spend the whole summer at the pool. So I'd go to practice and then I'd play with my friends all day in the pool, essentially. So I think that was my primary way I had fun. I hung out with my brothers and we played some video games and we'd play some adventure make-believe games as well. But sometimes Alex and I joke that I kind of like skipped childhood.
Sounds like it.
Because I just like really wanted to be good at sports. I feel like sometimes I've lived in reverse where I'm more of a kid now as a 31-year-old because I really do appreciate those little things and those little moments.
Because you didn't really give yourself the opportunity to enjoy it at that point.
Yeah, totally.
I assume your family was supportive, your mom and dad were supportive of what you were doing.
Oh, yeah.
Did you have a specific mentor or coach that was helping you along the way? How are you advancing at such a young age to such a high level?
I definitely had some really good coaches and influences in my life in the early days. My mom was always so incredibly involved and supportive in all of this. I don't think she missed a meet until sophomore year of college.
Oh, wow.
So she was always there, just always supporting me, always at my track meet. So it was kind of an activity we did. That's like the fun thing we do on Saturday. We go to a track meet together, and I'd go see how fast I could run, and then maybe we'd go to the mall or get something to eat.
Get some ice cream afterward.
So that was something I feel like a journey that we were taking together. And then I had a great coach, and he wasn't like a high school coach, but he was just really supportive. Coach Joe, he was my first coach, and he was the one who told my mom, you should really think about having her pursue this because she seems like she's pretty good at it, and she
seems to be
enjoys
enjoying
it.
it,
Yeah, so he was really influential in the early days because I don't even think my mom and I would have realized that I was good at running because we were just like, I'm sure lots of kids win local races. And then he kind of explained it like,
This is a different level.
yeah, he was like, kids normally don't win races by this much before they actually have trained at all. But I was probably running about 40 miles a week.
I was going to ask, because obviously you're still developing at this point. I mean, you're still a kid. You know what that looks like. 40 miles a week. Are you running the 800? Did that continue through high school, or did you change distances?
I always went up. And I think that was partially just me being very achievement focused. Like I
want the next challenge,
the next distance.
So what were you doing in high school by the time you're getting to senior year?
The 5K mostly. By my senior year, I was mostly competing with college events. So I'd go to local 5Ks at like Princeton or University of Pennsylvania. And I'd still do like the high school stuff, but I think the 5K was really where I
found your sweet spot.
I really found my sweet spot, and the 1 mile and the 2 mile was still a little bit short for me.
Gotcha. So is this solely on the track, or is this cross country, a mix of both?
Mix of both. I think cross country was always my strong suit. So I ran cross country all 4 years, and then I swam my first 2 years in high school in indoor, and then ran 4 years of track besides indoor track.
So you're doing all these things, you're moving up, you're competing at college level in high school, and obviously still focusing on academics because you ended up going to Stanford and you were studying mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
How did that happen, and what did that look like when you got to Stanford?
I actually did not think I was going to go to Stanford because it was too far.
Keep mentioning Princeton. Was that on your radar?
I looked at Princeton, I looked at Georgetown, I looked at Harvard. I actually committed to Harvard. That's where I was planning on going to school. I feel like that was the first time I maybe did something for myself. And of course, that would have been a phenomenal school to go to. I would have been very grateful for that, but I just felt so much more at home. When I went to California, it was almost like I could kind of feel
kind of let your hair down a little bit.
Yeah, weight was lifted off my shoulder. And I think I've always had this more creative side to me that I wasn't really exploring as much as a kid.
She'd mentioned music and singing and violin.
Yeah, and so I remember one of my teammates, she was one of my hosts when I was at Stanford, and she laughed when I didn't commit there at first because she said, I just could tell so quickly that you were a Stanford girl. She's just like, you wore neon, you talked about dyeing your hair purple, like she was just like, you just so California. She was really surprised when I decided not to go there, and so I think that was the first time I really did something a little out of the mold, even though, of course, it's like a phenomenal school.
Oh, absolutely. So are you making this decision based more on academics and this desire to pursue mechanical engineering, or how much does the running side play into that?
Yeah, it was definitely a combo. I was always told that I should go to a school that I would be happy at, even if I couldn't run tomorrow. So that was something I looked at. You know, I didn't want to go to school just to run, but I think the running culture was really important. The other thing that was really important to me, that Stanford was one of the only schools I saw that there wasn't an issue, was I needed the team not to have an eating disorder, because I had an eating disorder. And I knew that I didn't want to be surrounded by a bunch of women that also were anorexic, because I knew I was secretly anorexic.
I was going to ask if you were open with this or if this is a totally private battle.
No, I think some of my friends from college, I think most of them know now, but I think people thought I was totally fine. I think I hit it really well. I never got so skinny that I think it was visually obvious. I have more of a muscular frame, so
you were hiding it well?
I was able to hide it a little more than other people.
So how does that impact your performance then? Because you're not eating or keeping food down. I mean, how does that impact your ability to perform at such a high level?
Well, I think it's kind of like a whole spectrum that happens, or like a whole timeline, at least what I've seen with other people that have had eating disorders or started with anorexia. I think first it starts either from internal communication that you need to lose weight, or maybe you see someone that is, skinny, that's performing really well on the national stage. In my case, it was a club coach that I had telling me I was fat because I was a swimmer. So when I was 16, I had someone communicate to me, you're a little fat, but I think we can make this work.
I was going to ask if this developed just, I don't want to say naturally, but on its own, or if there was some sort of outside influence that kind of spun this up.
Yeah, no, it was a coach, and somebody I trusted.
Interesting.
And the tough thing for me was that I went from being a 7th place at state, I think is what I came in my sophomore year in the 2 mile. So pretty good result for a sophomore in New Jersey, which was a powerhouse in distance running at that point. And I lost 15 pounds after he told me that, and then I became one of the top recruits in the country. So I think it was really hard for me to
Separate those two.
To separate my eating disorder from my performance, even though I also started running 80 miles a week.
Oh my goodness.
So it was like there was a lot of other factors. I was training harder, I was more focused on running, and I was getting older and developing. But I think it was really hard for me to separate those. By the time I had finished high school, it was starting to negatively impact me. I had started using diuretics and really was just, I remember after conference championship, I was sitting in the bathroom and I just felt awful. And I was just like, what am I doing to myself? This isn't even helping anymore. I feel exhausted all the time. I was still winning, but I just felt awful.
Tired of being tired?
Yeah. And so then I think by the time I went into college, I realized that I needed to eat. But then I think you've messed up your hormones so much after you haven't eaten really for 2 years, because I was sticking to like 1,200 calories a day, which is crazy for,
anybody, let alone somebody that's trying to perform and run 80 miles a week.
Oh, yeah. It was crazy. And
Is it scary when you're staring this down and thinking, I need to make this shift and I need to take in more calories, which could potentially cause weight gain, but I'm trying to perform at this level?
Yes.
I mean, are you wrestling with that?
Yeah, I wrestled with it for almost 10 years.
How did you get your head around it to finally just push yourself forward?
It took until 2019, actually.
Really?
Bringing it all the way up to Rovi. But I basically went through phases. I was anorexic, and then I was binge eating and kind of more in that bulimic binge eating space. And then I was just disordered, where I would flip-flop between having some good days where I felt like I could eat healthy, but I was still really internally struggling, where maybe externally I was eating the right amount of calories, I was giving my body what it needed, I wasn't binging, but every thought was like, when's my next meal? When's my next meal?
You're just consumed by it.
When do I get to eat food? When do I get to eat food? Yeah, so I'm really fortunate for this, that it didn't fully take me out. Like a lot of my other competitors that have dealt with this, they just get a stress fracture every time they try and train now, even if they're just trying to train for their local 5K. And I feel really fortunate that didn't happen to me.
Why do you think that is?
I think part of it is because I developed really early as a kid. So I think I was just lucky that I developed as a woman way before my eating disorder happened, whereas I think a lot of girls develop the eating disorder and their body is developing
later
at the same time.
Gotcha.
But I think because I was already fully through puberty when this happened to me, I was able to get through it a little bit more.
So you mentioned injuries. How did your time at Stanford go? So I assume you got your undergrad from there?
Yeah.
What was your running career like?
Yeah. My freshman year was good. I was actually a scoring member. I was on varsity my freshman year, and we came in third place at NCAA's.
Okay.
So that was a pretty incredible experience. I actually don't think Stanford has come in third since then. So it's their most recent
You left with their
podium.
legacy. You took it away.
Yeah, that's the most recent podium finish. I think they've come in fourth a few times, but that was a super cool, incredible experience. Most of the season, I was like the number 5, number 6 runner. It was just so cool to be doing that as a freshman. And then the rest of my track season went pretty well. And then my sophomore season was really where I started to hit my stride. And I was typically our number 3 runner on the team behind 2 people, but one, Jess McLean, who was the top woman at Boston the other day. So super proud of her, give her a shout out. But that was a really great season for me. And then my sophomore track season, I actually was running really well, but I was having this mental breakdown, basically. A lot of my friends were starting to quit the team. And that was the first time I realized that you could quit something.
Is it like an identity crisis at this point?
Yeah, it was really weird. I think I was a little frustrated because I was not running 15:15 like Jess, and I was training with her. So that was, I think, part of it.
And were you having injuries at this point?
Not yet, but I think I was overtraining. So I think I was kind of building the base to lead to what happened to me the next 4 years or so. Is I was training outside of my means. I was trying to keep up with our top women, and maybe didn't want to admit that I wasn't quite there yet. And I was kind of in this weird space where the women right behind me weren't quite running fast enough, and the women in front of me were running too fast, but I would rather
push harder
than slow down. And maybe in hindsight, I should have just slowed down a little bit, and maybe I would have been a little bit healthier. So,
what injuries did you have?
My junior year, I tore my hamstring in fall, and then I got a sacral stress fracture. So I broke my sacrum on my right side, and then those take like 6 months to heal. So that took me out all indoor and outdoor. And then I finally got back my senior year, And then my iron was really low, but they misdiagnosed me. They told me my iron was fine. So I missed the whole season because they thought I was having like a mental breakdown, but my body was, I think I had an iron level 5 or something. So, and then I got another sacral stress fracture the day I graduated from Stanford on my left side. And I got that from slipping my disc. I slipped my L5 while I was moving out of my dorm. So, and then ran on it and then got another sacral stress fracture. So,
holy smokes.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with all these injuries. The running career isn't turning out exactly like you're hoping for. And you're still focusing on your studies. How's that going? Mechanical engineering?
Yeah, I think I've always ironically struggled with school because I have a hard time learning in a classroom environment. And so engineering was actually really cool for me because I finally got to use my hands. Okay. And so I felt like I could understand the content a lot better when I was able to actually...
Like the dynamics of motion and things like that?
Yeah, like when I could build my project instead of taking a test on it.
What was your focus in mechanical engineering?
I was technically product design, which is a subset of mechanical engineering that's design focused. And I tried bio, I tried computer science, I tried a bunch of different sciences. I do think I pigeonholed myself into science because I knew that it would be a good career to fall back on. Science and engineering, I knew that I would get a job. And I think with my dad, he lost his job in the 2008 economic financial crisis. And so I do think that was something that was really top of mind.
I don't want this to happen
to me.
Job
security. And I felt like I just kind of went to all the engineering buildings and didn't really feel like I totally fit in. And the product design building, the bathroom was hot pink and there were disco balls everywhere. And I was like,
my tribe.
This is engineering? This is awesome.
That's awesome.
It was really cool because it was a mechanical engineering degree, but you got to take, instead of some of the upper division mechanical engineering electives, you got to take art classes.
Oh, wow.
And so I took photography and I took a cool like coding with art class. So I used basic code and Arduino boards to design art in the real world. And we got to learn how to sketch really well. And so I felt like it was a really incredible blend of getting the practical skills, but also getting to learn more about the artistic outlet
which
side
we'll
of
get
things.
to. You don't want to jump too far ahead. So you get through Stanford and you finish up this degree. What's your target and how do you end up in Boise?
Yeah, that's a good question. How I end up in Boise actually goes all the way back to that same coach that told me I was fat.
Really?
Yeah, so he definitely had some major shortcomings the way he presented training, but his training he gave me was very good. It was all based off of Lisa Cole, who was the 10,000 meter track record holder until Parker Valby broke her record last year. So it had stood since 2008, I think. And her coach was, at that time, Iowa State coach, Coach Immels.
Okay.
And Coach Immels had just moved to Boise.
Interesting.
And so I thought after I basically didn't put up any results my last 2 years at Stanford, I thought this really worked for me in high school. Maybe it'll really work for me again, especially when the coach is not screaming at me. So,
sure.
Yeah. So I had one friend on the team from Stanford from Boise, and he said, it's a cool place. There's nice trails. And I was like, cool. I'm going to reach out to the coach. And I looked at some other schools, but I think in the back of my mind, I knew that if Boise State would take me, I was probably going to go to Boise State because it's just where I felt like I was supposed to go.
Sure. And did you always intend on going for an advanced degree, or was it you just wanted an opportunity to continue running?
Yeah, I didn't finish my degree at Boise State. I stopped when my eligibility stopped. I really liked my program, but I wasn't really in the financial position to pay for it.
Gotcha.
And I thought it would be better to just start my career. And I actually started Lumini while I was at Boise State, so that played a role in it as well.
And can you explain what Lumini is and how you became involved with that?
Yeah, Lumini is a tech startup, and basically what we make is we make radar systems that sense through walls to find people in disasters. So we have a device that's about the size of, I guess, my head or something, 6 inches by 6 inches, and you put it on the wall and it detects someone on the other side of the wall, says they're 10 feet away, they're breathing, they're walking, tells you what they're doing so that you can make a better decision for de-escalation and for fire response.
And where does that come from? Was that your idea that you had and you happened to just find the right person that was able to help bring it to life? Or what was your skill set in pairing there to create this amazing technology?
It was actually a class at Boise State. So the ironic thing about my master's program is it was a part-time master's, but you have to be a full-time student to be an NCAA athlete. So I had to find random classes to take. And so I ended up going to the entrepreneurial college because that felt very tangential to what I had done in undergrad. and generally the Stanford culture of startups and entrepreneurial endeavors. And so I took this class in the venture college, and then they said you should really take this class, and it was a class called Hacking for Defense. And basically the premise was give student teams complex problems that the military and other related users have, and see if they can find a solution that already exists out there, or if they can easily create a solution themselves.
Interesting.
And so that's how it all started. And we got a final interview. I think the reason I thought it was a really important thing to focus on, because my brothers are both in the military, and I liked the idea of being able to help in a way that didn't, involve weapons or anything, that was more like a de-escalation mechanism to save more lives.
As I say, it sounds like it's a life-saving opportunity.
Yeah, and so that was really cool. I thought building something that was so out there and unique, I think, was appealing to me. I wanted to see if I could do it. And then we also got a late stage interview to Y Combinator, which is the big tech.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the big tech startup accelerator. And we didn't get in that time. We got in 2019, so I went through that in 2019.
That's huge.
Yeah, but we got that interview, and I think the combination of the mission being really important, thinking we had a good solution, and getting that interview, which kind of made us say, we must be onto something, because Y Combinator thinks we're onto something.
Yeah.
That's what then made me decide that I was going to try it and see if I could do it.
See where it goes.
Yeah.
Well, so without going too far into it, I'm super curious. So it sounds like it started out as a class project.
Yeah.
And so you're with a team. How many people?
There were like 6 people on our original team, and then there was a co-founding team of 3 of us. So one of the co-founders was in my class, and the other co-founder was his college best friend.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Who's like one of my best friends now.
So you come up with the idea in class, you start working on it, you're getting this professional support outside of the class. At what point does it transition from a class project to something that you're going to turn into legitimate business? Obviously, Y Combinator, you're getting. How does that transition look like?
It was slow. I think there was like a year of true just not despair, but where we just did everything wrong. But I worked on it full time. I basically did an internship for 3 months, and then I started working on it full time after I was done with school. So it was pretty quick in how it transitioned, but we spent about a year in just prototype hell, where we would just make something and it wouldn't work, and
fail and learn, fail forward.
Exactly. And I was really starting to question why we were doing this. That's when I started actually running a little bit more again, because it felt like when I was doing the startup every day, I was like, what day is it? I'm just working all the time. I don't feel like I have a good semblance of life structure. I'm just getting out of bed and pressing a bunch of buttons. Yeah.
Sure.
And I never really fully stopped training, but I started training, and I had met my friend Emma Bates, who's a really good...
she's a friend of mine too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, she's super sweet.
Oh, she's
what she's
awesome.
done has been absolutely amazing.
Yeah. So I met her, and we started Idaho Distance Project.
Yeah, with Cameron?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then he was coaching me for a while.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we started that all together, and with Kinsey Middleton as well.
Okay.
Who's still in Boise. And I started getting more serious about running in that transition. And I remember thinking, if this next prototype doesn't work, when my marathon debut is over, I'm leaving Boise. I'm done with this. And then our prototype worked. We got into Y Combinator. I got an Olympic trials standard, so I wanted to stay here and train. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I guess I'm going to live in Boise now.
So 2 questions there. One, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm curious. When you're doing this startup and you're going in deep, are you raising money? How do you pay for this thing?
Y Combinator was our initial money, and then we did a seed round after that, and then we won a national competition with the Army that actually gave us a quite sizable grant, and so that's how we got started.
Gotcha. It's super. I always find that stuff fascinating.
Yeah.
But so while you're doing this, then you start to refocus on running, and up until that point, were you running for Boise State, or were you just out running the trails and having a good time?
Yeah, I ran at Boise State in 2016 and 2017, so I did it for a year and a half. And then after that, I was just running the trails. I was really just trying to get out there and stay consistent. And I signed up for Roby in 2018 and kind of secretly trained for it a little bit. I had no idea what to expect. I'd never done a half. I was just doing a lot of gym work. And everybody kept asking me when I was at my internship, when I said I was a runner, if I had ran Roby. And I was like, man,
you can't live in Boise without somebody asking if you ran Roby.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, I need to run this race. I'm going to do it. And I wanted to win. And
And how did it go?
And I won, so it was nice.
Not just one,
No,
but...
this was the first time.
Oh, first time.
Yes,
okay.
I didn't quite I just won.
Okay.
Yeah, just won, but it was the really defining moment in my career because I hadn't had a win for a while.
And now, did you say you were already focusing on some longer distances at that point? Because you said earlier on you're only running 2-3 mile focus, and Roby's a half marathon.
First half.
Okay.
No fuel.
Really?
Yeah, completely just
went on
I
guts.
Just did it was just a bad experience overall. I just sprinted past the whole field in the first mile and then just held on for dear life. And I was truly seeing stars by the end of it.
Where do you think your strength is, on the climbs or the descents?
Oh, that's hard.
What do you enjoy more?
Oh, the descent. I love the descent.
Yeah.
But I think I'm a pretty strong climber. I think that's why I liked cross country.
Okay.
And I think that's what won Roby for me the first year.
So you won Roby your first time out. And what does that springboard to, or how does your training change?
Yeah, at first it just gave me confidence.
Okay.
I just felt more like myself. It just was the first time in a few years that I felt like I had performed at anything, which maybe is a little dramatic, but I just had been so injured for so long. And it just gave me enough confidence to start entering more races. So I think I did Resort to Rock and won that as well. And then that's when someone said, you should contact Emma.
Hey, you're pretty good at this.
Yeah, and then they said you should contact Emma Bates because she's training and you seem to be training kind of seriously, so you should contact her. And then I met with her in Kinsey, and then we formed Idaho Distance Project, and then Cameron basically started coaching me, and that's when I truly started getting more serious again. And they had talked about qualifying for the Olympic trials. It felt like a reach goal, but I thought I can run 6:15 pace for 26 miles. That seems like something I can do. And I think that was really springboarding me into my next chapter of running, was just kind of having that goal of running a 2:45 marathon and starting to train seriously for it.
So you're coming back into training. You're focusing on the Y Combinator and building this startup. And now you're finding kind of that competitive edge again. You win Roby and you start training with this audacious goal of future qualifiers. So what's that do to your training now? I mean, are you running 30, 40 mile weeks and you go to 80 or 100, or how does that shift for you, and how much time do you start committing to it?
Yeah, I've never been super high mileage. So no, highest mileage week I've ever had in my life was in high school.
And what was that?
93.
Really?
Yeah.
So you're quality over quantity?
Yeah, and I seem to break down if I go any higher. So part of that's probably just like not having a lot of time for it. But
well, I think there's a lot to be said to the quality of it and the focus. So do you cross train as well? You mentioned
now I do, but I didn't back then. I think I had a hard time cross training for a while because I had PTSD from all the cross training that I did my junior and senior year.
Okay.
But I think the big difference that I had between winning Roby in 2018 was that there wasn't any expectations on me, and then I started doing the sport because I loved it. I loved doing the workouts.
Rediscovered the joy of it.
Yeah, so I think it was good for me to go through that really low point at Stanford and not run well at Boise State at all either, because it took that pressure off of me.
It's almost like you're going back to being a kid again, and you're out just playing and having fun and having a really good result from it, which now let's go to 2019. I don't know if Roby coming back around is your next focus race or if something happens in between there.
My focus was Grandma's Marathon. So I was in the middle of a marathon build. I did my first flat half marathon in January of 2019, and then in June of 2019 I had planned to debut in the marathon and hopefully get the Olympic trials qualifiers so that I didn't have to do another marathon before the Olympic trials.
And that was at Grandma's?
And that was at Grandma's,
And for those that don't know Grandma's, can you explain a little bit about the history of Grandma's and how did you do?
I don't actually know too much about the history, but it's a point-to-point, so that was phenomenal because a marathon can be kind of boring, so it's nice that you just get to go point-to-point. It was beautiful weather the day I did it, and it's in Duluth, Minnesota, so it's about 90 minutes north of the Minneapolis area. And I just picked it because I heard it was a good race to do. I didn't really know anything about it. I just heard you should try and
go run Grandma's.
Race Grandma's. So I did Roby as part of that build.
Okay.
And that was just a season opener that...
Stretch your legs out.
Yeah, I just decided to jump into it, really.
And how did 2019 go for you?
It was good. I broke the course record, so that was really fun.
By how much?
Oh, I think by a minute and a half.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
But it was an 8-minute PR for me on the course, so it was a pretty sizable improvement from 2018 to 2019, and that whole season, and especially that race, actually had a really big impact on how I healed my eating disorder.
Interesting.
Because I had still been associating performance with... Basically, I had extra weight on through all these injuries and everything, and I'd been associating my performance with my weight. And all of a sudden, I was the fastest ever on this historic course. And, Corey Mooney is a really good athlete and ran really well at the Olympic trials and everything. And then I went on to run 2:39 in my debut marathon.
Crazy.
And it all broke my mind, basically, with the eating disorder, which I'm so grateful for, because I was not wildly skinny. Of course, I was fit and everything, and I hate saying like skinny or not skinny,
Sure.
but I was not what my brain was defining as like
I'm putting this
ready.
in quotes, the typical
Yeah.
body type of this elite runner.
Exactly. And so to run, a marathon at 6:01, 6:02 pace,
Crazy.
it was screaming in my face
Yeah.
that skinny did not equal fast. I couldn't think that anymore. It literally was impossible.
You can't run marathons without some fueling, calories, and hydration. So what's the strategy look like for you to run that fast?
Yeah, it's hard to eat when you're running that fast.
Yeah, your stomach just doesn't like it.
It's so hard. I don't know if I've fully mastered that, but I stick to very neutral things and just try and get down
Like
as
what?
much as like a Morton gel
Okay.
or a goo
I like the
vanilla
Mortons. Those
flavored.
go down easy.
Yeah, I just try to get it down my throat as quickly as possible.
Do you stick to a specific timing strategy, or is it just depending on how you feel?
When I was doing a lot of marathons, which I haven't done one in 4 years, so it's been a little bit, I had a pretty specific strategy. I was
Okay.
trying to eat, I think, every 5 miles or something. So
Okay.
trying to get down as many.
Were you going for a
gels as
specific
possible.
calorie goal or carbohydrate amount?
Not really. I'm focused mostly on the number of gels. That was
Gotcha.
the easiest for me because I've always mostly had gels that are 100 calories. I think I'd normally shoot for 6 or 7, but I have a hard time after 5.
That just turns your stomach. Makes me think of ultras where fueling a whole ultra on gels to where you get to that point where you just
Yeah.
can't put it down.
Yeah.
So what happens at that point? So you qualified for, correct me, it's probably U.S.
Oh, the Olympic trials?
Yes.
Yeah, so I qualified for the Olympic trials in that marathon.
Okay.
And so I ran in the Olympic trials in 2020, right before the world shut down.
Okay.
My foot was broken in 6 places, so that
Oh,
was
my
not
goodness.
a good race for me. But I really wanted to do it. And in hindsight, I'm really glad I did because I didn't know that COVID was going to completely change our world.
Yeah.
That was basically the best time to have a foot broken
Foot
in
injury.
6 places, except for I couldn't go to the gym. So that was a little tough.
So you did run the trials?
Yeah, I ran the trials.
And how did it go for you?
Poorly.
Yeah.
I hadn't ran for about a month
Okay.
before the trials, so really just getting through it. I hated that because I wanted to be there to compete, but really all I had in that moment was to just be there and appreciate it. And I'm really grateful I did it because I remember it being such an incredible experience.
Did that shut the door then for you for marathons and you started moving towards trails? Because where I was going is
Yeah.
Team USA for mountain and trail.
Yeah. I did some other marathons. So I've ran a handful of 240 marathons. So I did the Marathon Project in 2020,
Okay.
which was like a small 40 person. They basically took like the fastest 40 people that wanted to do the marathon, and you had to take like 7 COVID tests or something
Oh,
to
jeez.
do it. It was like a really micro marathon. But then I kind of decided that I wasn't really loving the marathon as much. My body wasn't really agreeing with it. I just wanted to change. And I really felt like I had some unfinished business on the track
Oh, okay.
because the track had just been where I felt like I had spent most of my career.
Where it all started.
But I never actually got to perform. I felt like I was in the best shape of my life, and I never had gotten to use that fitness on the track. And this is when Alex started coaching me between 2020 and 2021. And I told him, I wanted to qualify for the Olympic trials in the 10K because they had moved the 10K Olympic trials to 2021.
Okay.
And so I really went after that goal pretty intensely. I just missed it, which was pretty incredible in hindsight because my PR was 35 minutes before that, and the time was 32:30, and I ended up running a little over 33 minutes.
Oh, jeez.
I only had one chance to make it, so I feel like I had more in the tank. But the whole reason I'm saying that is because the really beautiful thing that came out of that season was I didn't accomplish my A goal of making the Olympic trials. But I still had this thought in the back of my mind, especially from Roby, like, you're really good at trails and uphills. And
You've got that strength.
yeah, like there's something there. And I was actually talking to Dan Button, who's been on the
yeah,
pod
Dan.
a few times.
I love Dan.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm thinking about doing the Mountain National Championship, but I don't know if I want to go all the way to New Hampshire. It's so far. And he said, oh, it's not New Hampshire this year. It's in the Mount Hood area. I signed up the next day. I'd been doing foothills training for quite a while. I felt like training was getting a variety, not just doing greenbelt miles
Right.
every day, moving my body in different ways, but I didn't really know what to expect. I went to the Mountain Champs and I was like, there's a chance that I'm going to do really well here. There's a chance I'm also going to completely fail on my face, and I had no idea. and I came in fourth, and I made the team.
Crazy. And is Alex is training you at this point still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where does that lead?
Well, I was supposed to get to go to Thailand, but then they canceled the World Championships because of COVID.
Oh, jeez.
So I made the USA team. Like I can always say I've made a World Championship team, but I have not competed at the World Championships yet. And so that has been a little bit, yet. That has been really a little bit frustrating because I think that has been
You were
like
primed, you
a
were
lifelong
ready.
dream.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah, like I cried so much at the finish line. I was just overcome with emotions that I had finally done
Everything
it.
you've been through to be at that point.
Yeah.
So where does that lead after they cancel it? What happens at that point?
I tried to do one more marathon build. It didn't quite work out. And then after that, I basically transitioned to trail running. So I went over to trail and tried to do a 2022 season, tried to remake the team because they decided to reselect it, and got COVID right before the race. Probably wasn't in the best shape for that event. And so that didn't really work out. And then in 2023, I tried to make the team again, and I broke my foot and my leg during the race, which was pretty crazy. So
How'd you do that?
Just impact stress fractures.
Okay.
So I was having, it's kind of like a long story related to shoes, which is kind of ironic, but I was wearing a certain insole and I took it out because I was getting a blister and I probably shouldn't have taken it out. So it was just a silly decision that I probably shouldn't have made. And I've had to work a lot on my foot strength, and I've also done a lot of work with what I wear on my feet.
Not to totally sideline us, but I think every runner has a closet full of shoes of all different sorts, but they usually have a favorite. Do you have a specific shoe that's your go-to? It just works for you?
Yeah. Well, I did for 15 years.
And what was it?
The Nike Pegasus.
Really?
That was my go-to.
I could never wear that. It was always too narrow for me.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way to me now. So
Interesting. What do you wear now?
I wear Topos.
Do you really?
Yeah.
That's actually on my list. That's my next shoe to buy.
Yeah.
I've never worn a Topo, and I'm really interested in how those work.
Yeah, I feel
Which
like
one are
I
you wearing?
can't be brand loyal or something as a running store owner.
Which
but
we haven't even got to that. But what is it about the Topos then?
the wide toe box. So I have a Neuroma, and the Neuromas typically you need a little bit more space. So I developed the Neuroma the last few years. I think I've had it since 2019, but it really started causing issues for me in the last few years.
Okay.
And so I really like how the toe box is wide, but my foot's really narrow. So it's nice that it has a narrow heel as opposed to like just wearing a wide shoe.
Sure.
So
your foot's flopping around.
Yeah.
Do you focus on heel drop at all? Do you have a preferred heel drop?
Yeah, now I do. So I've always been in 10 millimeter, and I've always really preferred high drop. But again, because of the neuroma and some of the foot pain I was experiencing, 5 millimeter has been really good.
It's always my favorite sweet spot. 4 to 5. That's always been a go-to. I could never do the 10. It just feels like you're always in your toes.
Yeah, and I loved it, but I think one of the challenges and one of the reasons I kept getting injured was because I had done almost all my training in 10 millimeter drop shoes, and then in trail shoes, there's not many 10 millimeter drop shoes. So
how does that change your mechanics now?
Yeah, so I'd do all this training, and then I'd have my 4 to 5 millimeter trail shoes, and I think my foot really wasn't used to it or anything. So I think that has been a goal for a few years of mine, is to get in a little bit of a lower drop shoe, just because I didn't want to be switching that when I was going from the roads to the trails. But it's a good plug for going through the fit process, because your feet just change over time. And I just started wearing the same shoes because I had worn those shoes in high school and I had worn them in college. And in college you're kind of like,
it's what you know,
forced into whatever brand is supporting you, unless you want to buy your own shoes. And I didn't want to buy my own shoes. So, I was like,
free is always a good price.
Yeah, exactly. So
which model do you wear?
I wear the Atmos, Ultra Venture, and the Mountain Racer. So I wear all three of those. Yeah.
And then how much road do you do now as opposed to trail running?
Minimal, except for track workouts.
Gotcha.
And I do like a track workout at least every other week, and that is normally with Tree City Track Club. So,
gotcha. Okay, so that's a great point to pivot, because we haven't even started on. We're sitting in Fleet Feet in the Meridian store, which there's now Fleet Feet Nampa. Where did that come about? Obviously, you aligned with Alex and he was training you. Where did the romance develop, and where did you become not only life partners, but business partners now?
Well, romance was first. So we started dating right before COVID. So I feel like we were kind of in an accelerated, it was like you either like you're in your pod or you're not, you know? So we started dating in December 2019.
Okay.
And he was managing Fleet Feet Meridian at that time. And so I started learning more about Fleet Feet basically there. I bought my first pair of shoes at Fleet Feet when I was 8, but I wasn't necessarily super in the running scene. I tried to keep it honestly a little bit separate. Like at work is engineering and non-running things, and then running is the fun thing that I do. It was cool to meet someone that got the running thing. It'd be hard to be with someone like me if you didn't understand.
Oh, well, I shouldn't say running. But I understood there has to be an alignment there to understand the passion for it.
Well, it's such a big part of my life, so I think that was really cool, and we just really hit it off quickly. And then we probably were dating for about a little less than a year when he started coaching me. And that just kind of came up organically.
So you were dating before he started coaching you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we were dating for almost a year, and then I was going through a coaching transition. I didn't really know what my next step was, and we started just building out my training, and it was supposed to just be a temporary thing. And then I was like, you know what, this is really working. And with how much I'm working, because at this point I was fully into Lumini, I was traveling a lot for work, I was like, it is so nice to have a coach that knows what's going on in my life. I don't have to like say, I'm flying out on Tuesday and Sunday and I have a massive conference day on Wednesday. Please don't put a workout there. Like, he just knew all these things, being my life partner. And he was incredibly knowledgeable from his experience coaching other people, and then also working under Mr. Newton at York.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and Mr. Newton and the coach that I had in high school that wasn't phenomenal but had good training, I do think they have some similarities in their training. I think them and Immels, they do have a similar training philosophy. So I think that also was consistent with what I had really enjoyed before. But yeah, he started coaching me, and then about 6 months into coaching me, he ended up leaving the Meridian store. It was just time for a change. And so we were talking about how to sell sensors at dinner. And then I was just like, do you want to be our sales manager?
Oh, that's right. So he came into Lumini. It's funny because every time you say Lumini, it reminds me of like a Dan Brown book, like Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons.
Well, that's
what,
it's
what's the secret society
the
there?
all-knowing eye is what Lumini comes from.
Okay.
So it is like an Illuminati reference.
Total, okay.
Yeah, because we can see through the walls. So
that makes sense.
Actually, it's just spot on right there.
Okay,
so,
well, I'm a bookworm too, and I love Dan Brown books, Da Vinci Code, and Illuminati just reminds me of that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But yeah, so he started working for Lumini. And so then it was like he was my coach, and then he was also working at Lumini. No, my co-founder was his boss. We figured it was best that he was not my direct report. But so then he worked for Lumini, and then we got the opportunity to potentially take over Fleet Feet Meridian. And then I started moonlighting basically on that. He was really focused on the acquisition and getting everything up and running, but that's where marketing, and I hadn't got to use that as much, but I was always the person that made pitch decks. I made our Lumini logo. I always had that bit of creative element in Lumini. And so when he was like, we need someone to post on Instagram and send the emails, and I need you to make these race bibs or something. And I just started taking those things over. And then over time, that just became too much, where all of a sudden I'm taking all of these things
You're still doing Lumini full-time as well.
Yeah, and we had started a race company too. So we started Boise Front Trail Run, which is now Boise Front Trail Festival. We took that over right in the same week that we acquired Fleet Feet Meridian.
Oh my gosh.
It was separate. It just all happened at the same time. And so it did become too much. And then a little less than 2 years ago, my co-founder took over Lumini, and then I transitioned over to Fleet Feet.
That's awesome. And so now you get the creative outlet because, like you say, you're designing all the artwork, you're doing the social side, you're creating bibs and all that stuff. So how does it continue to expand now to where you're getting more involved in all these different races? And we just had the Boise Greenbelt Relays.
Yeah.
How does that turn into such an expansive project for you?
Yeah, I think we always say yes when like an opportunity presents itself and makes sense. And I think Alex and I have both just experienced such incredible things from running. I think we both had our low points too, but it really has changed both of our lives. And it was just inherent to me, if there's an opportunity in the community, we want to be able to do that and have someone else change their life through running. So, that started with making graphics, and it's become so much more than that. It's even cool to have Jareen here, because Jareen, I met her on a run, and then she became a Trail Fridays leader and a Winter Warriors leader, and is just an integral part of our community now, and a friend. It's just, I think if we see like a gap or see something that would be like really exciting for the community, we just want to do it, and we want to figure out how to make it happen, even if oh, we're going to put on a race. I've never designed a medal before. I'll just
say yes and figure it
go
out.
figure it out. Yeah. So I think it's all driven in what we want to do for the community.
And what is that? What would you say the overarching vision is? Because you touched on you support the Trail Fridays and now all these different races and new ones that are coming on board. We're out in the 2C, Nampa Caldwell, and there's races coming out there.
Yeah.
What's the overall vision of the races you're involved with Fleet Feet? Is there one kind of united direction you're going, or is it just saying yes and enjoying it in the process?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's tough to answer. I think that really it's just about creating opportunities and community for people. And I think that can look different ways. And I don't necessarily have this is the next step for what that is. You mentioned Boise Greenbelt Relays as an example. We thought of that event with our partners for Boise Running, which is our race event management company. And we were just saying how cool it would be. Like, we wanted to showcase Boise's beauty, because we feel like people run in the same place every day.
Yeah.
They get out their door and they run in the same spot. And I think since I didn't grow up here, I also have that perspective of when you live in a town that has no sidewalks.
Wide-eyed wonder of seeing everything.
You're like, no sidewalks. You just stick your hand out to make sure a car doesn't hit you. Like, that's what running in my hometown was like. And so I think, how cool would it be to show everyone Boise's nature and just how beautiful it is, but also work on team building, like get to accomplish something pretty incredible, like going 46 miles. And we want to make it happen.
Sure.
If it doesn't exist, we want to make it happen.
How much of it are you chasing down, and how much of it is now coming to you organically?
Yeah, there's a lot that comes to us organically. I think one of the cool things about Boise Greenbelt Relays is that was fully just something we thought of, and that was really fun to get to do that. And I love bringing other people's ideas to life. That's always super cool, because there's so many people in this community that have different ideas and needs and perspectives. What we have done has been really reactive. Like, we've taken over races, like Boise Front Trail Festival was originally not our race, and Foothills XC12K was a race we took over from the Nordic team, and Idaho Running Day we took over from someone. And so I think that was a really cool moment where we actually did something that was fully organic to what we really wanted to focus on. And I'm not saying that any of those other opportunities weren't incredible and aren't incredible races, but it was cool to say, this is our idea and this is what we're doing, and we're going to execute it now. So,
how important would you say it is to align with strategic partnerships? You've aligned with some pretty dynamic people, like you said, Boise Running. Can you talk a little bit to the importance of finding those strategic partnerships to help you move the mission forward?
No, totally. I think that when we're partnering with someone, we want to be aligned in that mission of like bringing everyone and the running community up. And so I think that's something we always try to figure out when we're first
I'm going to say, I want to throw something in on there because obviously we've had conversations with what we're trying to do with the podcast and kind of the same thing, unite community. I will say, I felt like in a very thoughtful way, and I don't mean this to sound negative by any stretch, I felt like there was a vetting process. It's like making sure that we're aligned. So it feels like you're looking for these opportunities, but you're also making sure, again, there is this mutual alignment towards this tied-in mission.
Totally. That's a great call out. And we only have so much time. Everybody only has so much time.
It blows me away, all the things you guys are doing. I don't think you guys ever sleep.
We try. We try. But I think we want to say yes to everything. I think that's like our default behavior, Alex and I. But I think we've had to be more intentional about who we partner with, what we focus on based on what our mission is, and if someone is really focused on bringing the entire community up. At the end of the day, of course, we own a business, and that is,
I was
we
going to
have
say,
to worry about
you
that.
still are, you're running a business. It has to be successful, so you still have to worry about the dollars at the end of the day, making sure that you're providing a good space for your team. With all these things that you're doing, how do you also provide mentorship and growth opportunities for the dynamic people that you partner with in your store?
Yeah, that's a good question too. It's hard to do everything perfectly. I think, we ebb and flow between where we feel like we're doing really well on events or really good on team development or really good in a different area. But I think we just try to be really authentic. And we also see everyone else as humans that matter.
I would say the empathy for both you and Alex is a superpower for sure.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for saying that. Yeah, it's important to us. I think we both had bosses that, like we wish that maybe they
learned from.
They would, we learned from. That's a great way to say it. That we learned from, or we were in situations where maybe we didn't feel valued, and we want everyone to feel valued. And that goes as far as people that are working in the stores, that are working with us as employees on our team, and also in races. A lot of people will say stuff to me because I have such a running resume that, oh, well, I'm not like a real runner like you. We're all runners. If you're like moving your legs, that's what it doesn't matter. My PR is faster than yours. A lot of times, like, I think it's so impressive for someone that does Roby in like 4.5 hours as opposed to my hour and 25.
It's a long time to suffer.
It's a long time to be out there.
Absolutely.
That's a long time. You got to worry about a lot more than what I have to worry about.
Yeah.
You know, some of our training program members, they were like, what did you eat during Roby? And I was like, I don't eat during Roby. I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. It's a different experience.
That's a factor. So I think that's something that we really focus on with everything. And we want to partner with people that we also feel like have that empathy and just generally, like, of course, we want to be successful business and all of that, but we want to do it the right way from a place where we can feel really good
authentic
about
to
what
yourselves.
we're doing in the community and everything. Yeah.
So with that, you've expanded out to the 2C, the store in Nampa now, which is awesome because we're out there and it makes it easy for us to get what we need. Is there any future goals on the horizon? Are you settling in with what you have? What does that look like?
You know, I think we were really excited to move to Nampa because there was nothing out there. You know, I think that was something that
serving a huge need out there.
Yeah, we had a lot of people coming in from Nampa to the store, and the more that people move to this area, the more traffic there is, and we just felt like there was a need, and that a lot of the events, I love Boise and Ada County, but there's not a lot of events out there. There's not a lot of run clubs or anything, and we just thought people shouldn't have to drive 40 minutes to find this stuff. I know that doesn't really answer your question about expansion or anything, but
and you don't have to. I mean, it could just be.
Yeah, like I think it just made sense.
Yeah.
And
you did just open it not that long ago, so it's probably hard to say, well, what are you going to do next?
Yeah, you know, and I think we're still getting our feet under us, but we're really grateful to have 2 stores, and I think that it's been awesome to have the leadership team in place that we do have, because you can't just clone yourself and be at 2 places in the same time. So I think we're still learning a bunch about how you even manage 2 different
stores.
Locations, and there's different challenges to that, and it's definitely like a new chapter in our learning. So,
constant learning process. Well, like you said, you know, now you're expanding and you have 2 stores to try to figure out how to manage, but you're also not slowing down with your involvement with the races and you know, the involvement with these other clubs. You mentioned Tree City Track Club. It's awesome to see. So let's shift a little bit, and I'm kind of curious, what does the future look like for you right now? Are you training for something specific? You know, what are you aiming for?
So on my training side of things, I am training right now for the Mountain National Championship on June 1st. And I'm trying to get top 3 because that's what will make the World Championship team. So hopefully 4th time is a charm.
And where's that at?
It's in New Hampshire. Mount Sunapee Scramble.
Okay, and this might show my ignorance, but is there a set distance?
Yeah, so in World Championship level mountain running, or I guess trail and mountain running, there's really 4 disciplines. There's the uphill, which is essentially a VK, but it doesn't stick to the VK format completely, which is why it's not called a VK. I also think that's trademarked, so the World Championships can't use it. So that normally varies from 3 to 6 miles uphill. And then the mountain distance is the one that I'm primarily focused on, which normally ranges from 6 to 9 miles with an up-down element.
Is there a specific amount of elevation gain loss that you have to have in that course?
It's not fully regulated, but normally it's 3,000 to 4,000 feet in the national championship qualifier, and that is normally reflective of the world championship. So it kind of depends on the year. I'm trying not to fixate on it as much as I have historically, because I don't actually know how much gain is in the race in New Hampshire or the World Championships.
And go and run it.
You know, Alex does, I think, so that's good because he can give me the right workout.
Yeah, feed you the information.
But I've tried not to fixate quite as much, because I think that a side effect of getting really good at the sport again in 2021 was that I started going down the path
the rabbit hole again.
Yeah, where I was getting too intense about everything. So
Alex is still training you? How's that dynamic work then? You're engaged to be married, your life partners, your business partners, he's your coach. Are there any times you're like, just get away from me?
Yeah, you know, I think sometimes there's definitely like a certain time of night. So he'll be like diving into something really intense on work, and I'm like, I have a big workout tomorrow. I need to go to bed. Please do not activate my brain right now.
Funny.
So I do think that we have to definitely balance everything, and that's just a constant challenge, I think. But, you know, I wouldn't want to do it with anybody else. And
it just seems to work.
Yeah, like we both would have a hard time not doing this many things, and that's probably a big part of why we found each other in this life, is that we're super passionate about what we do, and we want to do it with our whole heart, and we both appreciate that about each other.
It sounds like there are so many of these things that are aligned and combined, but you also have that yin and yang that seems to be so important.
Yeah. Well, and he'll just like go. And I think the fact that I'm still training so seriously, I literally can't go.
Yeah.
Because I do need to sleep and I do need to recover. And sometimes I'm exhausted. And so I think that does kind of balance us out sometimes, because otherwise I think we'd just be all gas, no brakes.
Going crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, you've been extremely generous with your time and the space sharing to record here in Fleet Feet Meridian. We've covered a lot of ground, kind of meandering here and there, and I hope that we've covered everything that you would like to talk about. Is there anything I missed? Anything you want to touch on that maybe I haven't asked about?
I don't think so. I think we talked about everything.
All kinds of good stuff happening.
Yeah.
So then I do have one closing question, but I want to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can find Fleet Feet and also where they can find information about you.
Yeah, so Fleet Feet, we have 2 locations like we talked about. You can find us at the Village, Fleet Feet Meridian, and then Fleet Feet Nampa, we're right off exit 33 on the Caldwell-Karcher intersection. Depending on what your food preference is, we're next to Costa Vida.
Love it.
And we're also very close to Texas Roadhouse. So depending on what you like eating, that's how to find us.
Isn't there Roxbury smoothies?
Roxbury. Yeah, so I guess if you like an acai bowl, you can get that.
Go.
There's lots of options. You can go to Winco.
Yeah. What's the website?
www.fleetfeetmeridian.com. That'll take you to both. That's the easier one to say. Yeah, both locations. And then you can also follow us on Instagram at Fleet Feet Treasure Valley. And then we have a Facebook group that we do a bunch of community events in. We share race discount codes sometimes. We have, it's basically the spot where any community action happens, and that's called Fleet Feet Treasure Valley Warriors, and that's on Facebook.
Okay. And then for you specifically?
Yeah.
How can they find you?
I'm on Instagram. Sometimes I post. I manage a lot of social media these days, so there's not as much posting on my own page, but if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at Legan Macy, which is just switching Leganmacy. It's my college nickname. And then I'm also on Strava, which I post all of my training. I'm an open book. So if you are curious on what a working professional runner does for training, it is all on there.
Trying to balance it all out.
Yeah.
You know, actually, that leads to one other question I do want to ask before my closing question. So everything that you've been through, and you kind of touched on this when we were talking before we started recording, what does it mean to you now for people that see what you're doing and come to you and see you as a mentor?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think one of the things that I have grappled with that's kind of related to that is that I feel like running can be really selfish.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I have had a harder time with that the older I've gotten. I think it's really easy to be okay being selfish when you're 22, 23, but I think when you're 30 and you're like, well, I really should be like focused on all these community events, or why am I not answering this email and training instead?
Just all the other things.
Yeah, and I think something that I have really focused on is, of course, I have my own goals, but I do want to inspire others.
Yeah.
And that's really important to me. And, you know, people have come up and said, oh, you inspired me to do this. And that just means the world, because that means I help someone else accomplish their goals. So, you know, I'm always an open book, and it really does mean the world when people tell me that I have made some sort of impact on their life through my running journey. So
that's awesome. And you're obviously very friendly, approachable, and all that. So to anybody that has that opportunity, you know, you're not scary.
Oh, thanks.
You know, so thank you so much for sharing all your time. I don't know if you know the question that's coming, but I do like to close these out on what does legacy mean to you, and what's the legacy you want to be remembered for?
Yeah. I've thought about this a lot because I listen to your podcast, and I think it's hard to say like what legacy means to me, but I think I know what I want my legacy to be, and I want to be known as someone that did not, it's funny because it's like related to your podcast name, is like that did not stick in the norm. I feel like I have tried to deviate from the norm, and that's something that I have pursued actively, and it has felt almost unintentional the way that I've done that. And I just want people to feel comfortable doing whatever they want to do, and I hope that's something that people see in me. And if that inspires them to do what they want to do, if that's like dyeing their entire head purple, even though it makes no sense. If you don't know me, that's what color my hair is. I just want people to do whatever they want to do that makes them happy. And I hope that by facing some of those decisions and doing it myself, that I can inspire other people to do that.
Finding and sharing your unique voice.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you again so much for taking the time, and I can't wait to see what you do with everything coming up with the races. We're going to be cheering for you in June, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And for anybody that's looking for a great place to come and not only find the gear that you need, but find amazing people that are here to help and support your goals, Fleet Feet is the spot to be. And again, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And that wraps up an awesome conversation with the one and only Megan Lacy. Megan, thank you for your honesty and your willingness to share not just the wins, but the work. You remind us that showing up with intention is the most powerful thing we can do. If you want to learn more about Megan or check out upcoming Fleet Feet events, you can find the links in the show notes. And if this episode sparked something in you, please take a moment and share it with a friend. As always, thank you for the ongoing support. And remember, stay curious, keep moving forward, and get outside and run from the norm.
Check that mic, make sure it sound right, boy.